The flesh, a bug's life. The skin is one of the most vulnerable of organs, decomposing so quickly it can often leave frustratingly few clues in a murder investigation. That's why bugs are among forensic pathology's best allies. At a research facility in Tennessee nicknamed the Body Farm, human bodies in various stages of decay are scattered over a few acres like decomposing flesh sculptures to see how quickly insects attack them. After death, insects move in within minutes, says facility director Dr. Richard Jantz. They are critical in estimating time since death. Because of their almost immediate infestation of corpses and the precise breeding patterns that result, maggots can tell pathologists a tremendous amount. One of Dr. Baden's favorite bugmen is Dr. Neil Haskell, one of the leading forensic entomologists in the country. He is a hulking middle-aged prankster from Indiana who collects vintage war vehicles and wears t-shirts that read "No flies on me." There are 5 major stages of decomposition: fresh, bloat, decay, dry, and remains. Moving from one to the next is more of a slide on a continuum. During this, insects come and go in what is known as insect succession. There are various things that bugs can do relating to unnatural death. Body lice and mosquitoes, as well as maggots, may contain the DNA of a victim and in some cases of a perpetrator as well. Bugs tell us when and where someone was killed, and they do it organically and with accuracy that no man-made system will ever reproduce. Dr. Haskell relates the details of a case he worked in Oklahoma, one of the 500 or so that will have him driving back and forth across the country this year. August in Stroud, Oklahoma is hot, and flesh left out in the sun turns bad real fast. One morning, a neighbor followed his nose across the street to the home of Aureliano Cisneros and his wife, Linda Howell. The stench emanating from a pile of junk in the driveway of the home had gone from being a curiosity to being a nuisance, and it was swarming with flies. Underneath a pile of dresser drawers, suitcases, and a tarp was the body of Aureliano Cisneros, last seen leaving a local bar with his wife. On the tarp was a powdery substance that they initially thought was drugs, says Dr. Haskell. It wasn't. Arm & Hammer might take care of your fridge, but it doesn't do shit for the decomposing body on your front lawn. When Linda Howell was arrested for the murder of her husband, law enforcement investigators had a body and a motive, but a lousy timeline. Are we talking 24 to 48 hours that he'd been lying there? Asked Haskell, or are we talking 4 days? We have to know. The bugs around the body of Aureliano were 2 common flies, the black blowfly and the secondary screwworm. The fly larvae, maggots, collected at the crime scene were enough evidence for Haskell to determine their species and conclude they were in their 3rd development stage, or instar, the final stage before they would crawl off to pupate and mature into adult flies. Temperature is the key in the length of the maggot's development process. Heat speeds it up, cold slows it down, and they do so on a predictable timeline that Haskell can recite like the Pledge of Allegiance. Temperature records from weather stations near Stroud were consulted for the days following the couple's argument in the bar. Now we're going to need 950 to 1,150 accumulated degree hours to get blowflies to mature, Haskell explains. So I'm going to take the known weather data and calculate forward or backward. For her story to prove true that he was alive Saturday night, the 6th, knowing that his body was discovered on the 8th, knowing that blowflies are not active at night, there's no energy adding up there. On the 7th, we've got heat from sunrise on with accumulated hours until midnight, giving us a total maximum of 450 degree hours. You can't get the eggs hatched in those degree hours, so there's no way that her story could be true. Sometime prior to the 6th, yes, on the 5th, we move into the ballpark for accumulated degree hours. The death, Haskell determined, happened Thursday night. Not long after that, Linda Howell accepted a plea bargain. Repacking the suitcase. You do what you need to do. You do it because that is what the dead deserve. People ask me about the effect on my life of forensic pathology, year after year, body after body, and I sometimes find myself saying that I am an atheist. It is hard for me to believe in a God who will allow people to do the horrible things they do to one another. Seeing what humans do to one another every single day for more than 40 years, I have turned away from religion toward science. At the end of the autopsy, the morgue assistant will pick up the organs with forceps and return them to the cavity of the body. The important specimens will be saved in a jar for evidence. They will join the jars lining the walls of the room, packed in tight between rows of slide boxes on which there are more tissue samples. In one room, there is a box of breast implants that have been stored for possible civil action. The morgue assistant will finish packing the body and then sew up the incisions with large looping movements of the baseball stitch. Soon after, an autopsy report will be delivered to those who need it. Page 1 states the name, birth date, date of discovery, and autopsy date. At the bottom it says, manner of death, homicide. Coroner's case file number 1, murder and meatballs. It was late November in 1979 when Lenny Sciambra, names have been changed, a low-level mobster, sat down to a helping of spaghetti and meatballs, a favorite recipe handed down through his wife's family. During dinner, he got a call from an associate, Joey Calabrese, who demanded a meat that night. He left and never returned. 5 months later, inflated by the bacteria in the warming spring water, a body floated to the surface of a Brooklyn waterway. The police called Dr. Michael Baden, then chief medical examiner for Brooklyn. Only through dental records was he able to identify the dead man as Sciambra. 3 bullet wounds to the head indicated the cause of death, but police couldn't connect Calabrese to the hit. Water erases a lot of evidence. Establishing a precise time of death was problematic. When Baden opened the stomach, he found Lenny's last meal preserved, spaghetti and meatballs. Since 90% of a meal is digested within 2 hours of eating, it was obvious Calabrese had given Lenny a few slugs for dessert. The DNA's case against Joey Calabrese threatened to crumble in court when a woman claiming to be Lenny's former girlfriend came forward to testify that Lenny had come to stay with her after meeting with Joey. He'd also eaten several meals of her spaghetti and meatballs. Naturally, this coincided with Calabrese's alibi that he was in Hawaii in the days following his nighttime meet with Lenny. Baden didn't believe the girlfriend's story. He had saved the dead man's stomach contents and asked Mrs. Sciambra if she could identify them. On the witness stand, she named ingredients in the meatballs only the real chef would know, saying, "That woman's lying. This is my mother's recipe." The jury believed her, and Calabrese was convicted of murder. Coroner's case file number 2, Birkin Binion. Lonnie Ted Binion was the scion of one of Las Vegas's most prominent families. His father founded the famous Horseshoe Casino, but much of the cash fed Binion's 15-year heroin addiction. In September 1998, no one was surprised when the 55-year-old was found dead on the floor of his home. County medical examiner Larry Sims ruled the cause of death to be an overdose, but in the months following Binion's death, disturbing information surfaced. It turned out his girlfriend, 26-year-old former strip club employee Sandy Murphy, had been cheating on Binion with one of his closest friends, 33-year-old Rick Tabish, and before his death, Binion had instructed his lawyer to drop Murphy from his will. Suspicious, Binion's family called in Dr. Baden. Several discrepancies stood out. Photographs of the dead man's eyes revealed tiny speckled bruises inside the lower eyelids. Potential hemorrhages, characteristic of strangulation or suffocation, also small circular bruises discolored his chest. Baden suspected Binion was a victim of Birkin, a means of suffocation in which a killer covers the victim's nose and mouth while sitting on his chest. The practice is named after early serial killer William Burke, who in the 1820s perfected the technique by killing 15 people in order to sell their bodies to a medical school anatomy class. When Baden took the stand at the preliminary hearing on August 19, 1999, Murphy and Tabish seemed like two young people in love. However, they both went rigid when Baden testified that the button-shaped bruises had been caused when Binion's attackers sat on his chest and burked him. At that instant, says Baden, I had a feeling that I only get in courtrooms, when it seems that the defendant knows that someone else knows what happened. On May 19, 2000, after 8 days of deliberation, a jury found Sandy Murphy and Rick Tabish guilty of murder. They were sentenced to life in prison. Coroner's case file number 3, Day of the Maggots. On Sunday morning, April 28, 1985, residents of a run-down neighborhood of Plainfield, New Jersey, noticed a person in the front seat of an abandoned, rusted-out Volkswagen sitting motionless. Too motionless, looking closer, they realized it was the corpse of a woman surrounded by empty beer cans and vodka bottles. The deceased was Gail Morris, a 30-year-old alcoholic. Morris hung out with 45-year-old Leonard Barco, a janitor married to another woman. Morris's brother-in-law had last seen them together Friday morning. After the police grabbed Barco, he admitted he'd fought with Morris. He said they had gotten drunk on Saturday night. At 11 p.m., he told her He was going home to his wife. They argued. She hit him with a broom handle. Barco said he hit her back and left. Investigators were sure they had their man. The medical examiner believed Morris had been dead more than 24 hours. Bruises on her neck and chest suggested she had been beaten and strangled. Police interrogated Barco again, and under determined prodding, he changed his story. Yes, they had fought early Friday morning, and he had murdered her. I feel bad because I killed Gail, Barco sobbed. Despite the confession, there were discrepancies in the case. Investigators believed Morris had died of strangulation, yet Barco testified that he'd hit his girlfriend with a stick. The public defender asked Dr. Baden to review the case. Reviewing the evidence, Baden saw glaring holes in the prosecution's story. There were no potential hemorrhages typical of strangulation, and the bruises on her chest and neck were minor, the sort of injuries long-term alcoholics frequently get from falling down and bumping into things. Her blood alcohol level was a lethal 0.46%. Most telling of all, a close examination of autopsy photos revealed unhatched maggot eggs in her eyes. Baden knew the eggs had probably been laid around the time of death and would have hatched in less than 24 hours. Morris could not have died Friday morning. The maggot eggs placed her death just a few hours before she was found on Sunday. More evidence was gathered that proved Barco's original story was true, including testimony from witnesses who had seen Morris alive on Friday and Saturday. Morris had not been murdered at all. She had drunk herself to death. Barco was set free.